as something that is very hard to describe. But at the same time, I have to say that the fire department, the police department, they were all there. They were so brave, all those men and women, that I feel that thanks to them, many people were saved.
Yes, can I interrupt there for a second? When I was coming down, just as I left the building, there were still firemen inside the building on those floors that I mentioned before, on the 34, 38, 39, and 27th floor. And I'm 100% sure that they didn't make it. And the officer that told me to get out with the group that was taking the person on the gurney was an officer from the Port Authority Police, Officer Lim. I know he didn't make it, because as I came out of the building, I saw a lot of bodies on the floor. I saw a lady encrusted on the floor. That's probably one of the persons that jumped from the building, if he jumped from the building. But it was like it melted on the floor. That's how bad it was. As I came out of the building, we hear the rumbling, and I was told, run. When I look up, everything is coming down, and I start running as far as I could, and we all jumped under one of the fire trucks, right on time, because everything just came right on top of us. We could have been crushed because the truck was coming down on us, and all of a sudden it stopped, and we were pulled out from under the truck. But I know these officers didn't make it.
Mr. Marcos, Mr. Martinez, thank you for your extraordinary descriptions of what was going on in and around the buildings, excuse me, around 9 o'clock this morning, a little before 9, and a little after 9 here in New York. We've heard a number of references today. Certainly the first thing we thought of as we were coming in to the February 93 attack on the World Trade Center. And as horrible as that was, and it was, 6 people died that day. Many hundreds were injured, but 6 people perished. It is not reasonable to believe that the numbers will be anything like that. They will be far, far worse. And I think we're just beginning to get a sense of the magnitude. CNN's Judy Woodruff in Washington. Judy?
Aaron, we're listening to your reporting and the people you've been talking with. I have to say, in stunned silence, none of us ever seen anything close to the magnitude of this horrific events of this morning. Just to quickly recap, 4 commercial airplanes in the United States, 2 United Airlines, 2 American Airlines, have crashed. We know 2 of them went into, and you can see the flights here, American Airlines Flight 11 leaving Boston on the way to Los Angeles. This is one of the planes, American Airlines 77 Dulles to Los Angeles. That plane, that second plane, believed to have crashed into the Pentagon, but again, that's not confirmed. The first American Airlines flight believed to have crashed into one of the World Trade Center towers. United Airlines Flight 93 leaving Newark on the way to San Francisco, believed to have crashed in Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh. And finally, another United Airlines flight believed to have crashed into the World Trade Center. In all, horrific, not just damage, but surely loss of life. It's far too early to know victims, the number of victims, the number of casualties. We do have some information we want to share with you. In addition to what you're seeing in New York City, one of those planes, as we said, crashed into the Pentagon. We're going to be taking you there in a moment to our correspondent, Bob Franken. But we want to let you know what we're learning, what our correspondents are learning, that in the last little while, 5 battleships, some of them destroyers, we know have left Norfolk and have moved out of port in order to be deployed for security reasons along the east coast of the United States. In addition, 2 aircraft carriers that were based in Norfolk, in the Norfolk area, have been moved out to sea and on their way to New York, to the New York area. Now, we don't have much more information than that. We were originally told they were just leaving port for safety reasons, for security reasons. We're now told that very specifically the mission of the aircraft carriers is to move into the New York area. The mission of the battleships to be deployed along the East Coast. And of course, as we get more information, we'll share that with you. As I turn to Bob Franken at the Pentagon, I just want to tell you, President Bush we can tell you now has been at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. He's now leaving that site on his way to an undisclosed location. Authorities telling us that they will not tell us where he is headed. Secretary of State Powell, the same story there, on his way back to the United States from a conference in Peru to an undisclosed location. And leaders of the United States Congress, both parties and both houses of Congress, moved to an undisclosed location. Now to our correspondent at the Pentagon, Bob Franken, who is, I believe, at a safe distance there from what's been going on. Bob, please bring us up to date.
Well, we're on the east side of the Pentagon, as you can see, Judy, and you can see over my shoulder that smoke continues to billow, smoke that is sometimes thick, sometimes a little dissipated, but we're talking about 4.5 hours after a plane, it is described as probably being a jumbo jet-sized plane, crashed into the Pentagon about 9:20 this morning. We now want to show you what it looks like on the west side. This is video that was shot by Vito Maggiola, who is an assignment editor and producer for CNN, who was able to get video. You can see that firefighters there are fighting in an area, rings 4, 5, and 6, on the west side of the Pentagon. Vito says that it was an area, in his estimation, that was about 30 yards wide and about 10 yards deep into the building. The firefighting was hampered, he says, because inside the building, sprinklers, standpipes, other forms of hydrants were damaged. There's an estimate that several hundred firefighters and emergency workers are there at the Pentagon. We're also told, of course, that there have been evacuation efforts throughout the day. We can see those. We do not have an estimate on the number of casualties. I can tell you that from our vantage point, we have seen a constant parade of casualty units, military casualty units, civilian ambulances, fire engines, and the like going to the Pentagon. There, of course, have been casualties, but as I said, we don't have any sort of estimate about that now. Now, we do also have somebody to talk with us who was an eyewitness to the actual crash. He was watching from Arlington, Virginia, which is a suburb over. His name is Tim Timmerman. Mr. Timmerman, are you with us right now?
I sure am.
You're a pilot. Tell us what you saw.
Well, I was looking out the window. I live on a 16th floor overlooking the Pentagon, and it's a corner apartment, so I have quite a panorama. And being next to National Airport, I hear jets all the time, but this jet engine I heard was way too loud. I looked out to the south, to the southwest, and it came right down 395, right over Columbia Pike. And as it went by the Sheraton Hotel, the pilot added power to the engines. I heard it spool up a little more. And then I lost it behind a building, and then it came out, and I saw it hit right in front of, it didn't appear to crash into the building. Most of the energy was dissipated and hitting the ground. But I saw the nose break up, I saw the wings fly forward, and then the conflagration took, just engulfed everything in flames. It was horrible.
What can you tell us about the plane itself?
It was a Boeing 757, American Airlines, no question.
You say that it was a Boeing, and you say it was a 757 or 767. It's hard.
757.
757,
yeah,
which
American
of course
Airlines.
is American Airlines, one of the new generation of jets, and of course,
it was not. It was so close to me. It was like looking out my window and looking at the helicopter. It was just right there.
We were told that it was. We were told that it was flying so low that it clipped off a couple of light poles on its way in.
That might have happened behind the apartments that occluded my view, and when it reappeared, it was right before impact. And like I said, I saw the airplane disintegrate and then just blow up into a huge ball of flames.
So there was a fireball that you saw.
Absolutely, and the building shook, and it was, quite a tremendous explosion.
What did you see after that?
Nothing but the flames, and I sat here and I took a few pictures out my window, and I noticed the fire trucks, and the response was just wonderful. Fire trucks were there quickly. I saw the area. The building didn't look very damaged initially, but I do see now, looking out my window, there's quite a chunk in it. But I think the blessing here might have been that the airplane hit before it hit the building, hit the ground. A lot of energy might have gone that way. That's what it appeared like.
Well, there is, of course, we've heard some discussion about the fact that it could have been worse had it actually gone a little bit higher and gone into what's called the ring, the center of the Pentagon,
exactly.
which is
exactly.
This is a 5-sided building.
Right. As you know, the rings are A, B, C, D, E. It has just caught the E ring on the outside, and that's why I felt it didn't look as damaged as it could be. It looked like on the helipad, which is on that side.
Right. Did you see any people being removed, any injured being removed, that type of thing?
No, sir. I'm up at about a quarter of a mile, maybe a little bit closer, and at that point I saw nothing like that.
Tim Timmerman, thank you very much. An eyewitness, Judy, to the crash. We still have no idea about the number of casualties. We know that there is a gaping hole on the west side of the Pentagon. As you can see, the smoke continues to billow. Judy?
All right, Bob Franken, and of course our audience, no surprise, hospitals in the Washington area dealing with casualties from the plane crash at the Pentagon. We were told a few hours ago there's a blood shortage in the Washington area. Hospitals wanting people to know if you are in a position to donate blood, it would very much be needed and appreciated. And I just want to quickly say here before we go to the site of the Pennsylvania crash that the D.C. National Guard was having difficulty getting through to people that it needs to mobilize. And this specifically, this is information specific to the Washington, D.C. area. The D.C. Guard wants to alert the 372nd Military Police Battalion and its subordinate companies to report as soon as possible to the D.C. Armory. Now, we got this information just about half an hour ago, and there have been so many other stories and pieces of information coming in. We haven't been able to get this out, but we do want to get it out now. Perhaps it will do some good. Joining us now, I mentioned to you a moment ago that we have a correspondent on the scene of the airplane crash into the ground, we believe. I'm going to go to David Mattingly, CNN correspondent there in Pennsylvania. This is near Shanksville, Somerset County in western Pennsylvania, about 80 miles outside of Pittsburgh. David Mattingly, are you with us now?
Yes, Judy, I'm here, and we are outside of the town of Shanksville. And to give you some idea of what kind of countryside this is, to my left is a huge field of corn. To my right is a rolling green pastoral hill here at the edge of the Allegheny Mountains. One of the last places you would probably expect to be touched by the violence of an act of terrible terrorism like we have seen today. But people here in the area have reported that they saw the commercial airliner going overhead at about 2,000 to 3,000 feet with no landing gear down. They heard then a loud roar of an engine, at which point the jet climbed and then banked sharply to the left before going down straight on a 45-degree angle. Now, it hit the ground at that 45-degree angle. People here at the scene say there are no large pieces of debris even left from the plane. No hope of, at this point, it seems to be no hope of survivors. There's just about every piece of emergency personnel here from miles around. The mood is considerably calmer, as you might imagine, than what you might see in Washington or New York, but there is a great deal of concern. Schools are being closed, businesses are being closed up into Pittsburgh and other parts of Pennsylvania. Prayer vigils are being reported, scheduled all across this part of Pennsylvania as far as away as Altoona has been reported. Also, at this point, there has been an emergency staging area set up. We are a good ways away from the crash scene, and we will see what transpires here. Judy?
David Mattingly on the scene, as we're saying there, near Shanksville, a small town in Somerset County, about 80 miles south of Pittsburgh. This the site of one of the two United Airlines aircraft. This a Boeing 757 left Newark, New Jersey this morning on its way to San Francisco. This is the plane that we know crashed. And you just, with David Mattingly's report, looking at the site of where this plane came down. We don't know where, we presume terrorists behind this, what their destination was, what their target was. We can only presume, we can only guess that they were short of the target, that they were headed someplace farther, someplace else from where they landed. With me now here in the studio, Connecticut Democratic Senator Christopher Dodd. Senator Dodd, a longtime member of not only the Senate, but of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Dodd, first of all, what can you say to the American people listening who want to know about the security of the leaders of our country, the President, and everyone else?
Well, I think they've taken the proper steps in here, and you haven't heard as much from some of the leaders as you might like at this point, but I think those responsible for their security are doing exactly what they should be doing. I'm told that they're in very good shape, that they are being isolated because we don't know the magnitude of this effort. It's beyond our imagination already what has occurred, and if someone or organization clearly responsible for this sophisticated an effort, the potential for them doing more damage is obviously obvious. And so making sure that our leaders are secure is the right step. And For those who may be wondering abroad who are watching this program, Judy, I'm a Democrat, as you know. We stand completely and totally behind our president. We may have our differences from time to time, but on a day like this, which rivals, if not exceeds, the attack on Pearl Harbor, almost 60 years ago, 3 months from now, we stand totally united behind our president and our government. They are taking the proper steps. We're pulling together as a people, and we will overcome this. Initially, obviously, our prayers and thoughts goes for those who've lost their lives, have been injured in this incredible attack. And then we will, yes, I'm sorry.
Senator, I'm just going to interrupt you now. We're told President Bush just about to be wheels up from Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. And now let's go back to Aaron Brown in New York.
Judy, thank you. Senator, thank you both. I believe we have former Secretary Henry Kissinger on the phone. The Secretary is in Germany today, and he joins us on the phone from there. Mr. Kissinger, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Just quickly, sir, your reactions to what is unfolding in the United States today.
Well, it's obviously a shocking event. It was, I was giving a speech when somebody came in and interrupted the question period to make that announcement, and nobody in the room believed it. They all thought it had to be a mistake. Well, it's obviously, it's an integrated attack and must be dealt with in an integrated way.
Well, when you say an integrated attack and dealt with in an integrated way, tell me what that means, sir.
Well, it is obviously any organization that can plan such a coordinated attack within a very brief period of time must have substantial resources and must have a very capable organization and must have a haven where it is planning these things. You can't do that in a back room.
And when you talk about an integrated response...
Well, the integrated response is obviously, first of all, I want to say,
okay,
like every American right now, I'm behind the president. And this, the response right now has been exactly what is needed. And there's, the first necessity has to be to go through the tragedy, to help the families, and to clean up the immediate situation. Then the next step will have to be a program to attempt to eradicate the source of this and to bring pressure and serious pressure on governments that harbor this kind of organization, and especially governments where we suspect that these organizations are located.
Sir, for a long time, there's been a kind of cat and mouse game, and I don't make light of this in any sense when I say game, between the governments that harbor terrorists and our government, other Western governments. It's all changed today, hasn't it? I mean, the stakes have changed enormously. The response likely will change enormously. It's all different, isn't it?
That's correct. When these terrorists dare to attack the territory of the United States, it then becomes a question of the functioning of our society. And we have to protect ourselves, and I'm sure we will. And I think it must now, it's not an isolated attack. It's not just an attack on an embassy, which is bad enough. And it can't be dealt with one retaliatory blow.
It cannot be dealt with one retaliatory blow?
No. There has to be a systemic attack. I don't know what that means.
I understand.
And I'm not sitting here with a great plan. I'm saying this is what I would think our government will want to work towards.
And would you expect that we, the United States government, will find enormous international support for whatever actions the United States government chooses to take, or will there be those important governments that resist here?
Well, first thing is we have to protect ourselves. We would, of course, like to get as much support as we can. And we will be able to judge our friends by the degree of support that we get. But there'll be some governments who say we have to understand the conditions that produce this. There will come a time to deal with its circumstances, but the immediate thing is these organizations have to be put on the run. If they have to spend all their time trying to survive, they have less time for terrorism.
And, Mr. Secretary, we heard, and I'm not sure you were able to, but a few moments ago, Chris Dodd, Senator Dodd of Connecticut, compared this to the attack on Pearl Harbor. Can you give me any historical context for what has taken place today, or are we a bit too close to it all to understand it yet?
Well, the attack on Pearl Harbor was, I guess, the first attack, certainly the first attack from across the seas on the territory of the United States, but it was not yet the mainland. And I agree with Senator Dodd. This is comparable to an attack on Pearl Harbor, and it must have the same response, and the people who did it must have the same end as the people who attacked Pearl Harbor. But it isn't just the people who did it, it's the people who make it possible.
These are the governments that harbor those who carry out these attacks.
That harbor or encourage them with their propaganda.
Mr. Secretary, thank you. Former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, who joins us from Germany, where he was attending a conference. When he heard the news, he said it was silent, unbelievable. People simply could not believe what they were hearing. I think that's a term, a phrase you will hear a lot over the days and weeks to come. What has happened here in New York and in Washington and in other parts of the country, unbelievable. A national tragedy. Judy?
Aaron, it's true. No one is able to grasp the enormity of what we're looking at and what we're dealing with here. Let's go now to the Pentagon, where Rear Admiral Quigley is briefing reporters. I believe we have that picture right now.
Your broadcast to phone their families and loved ones immediately to let them know they're okay. And if they are among the injured or the casualties from this, then we will work our way through to identifying them and getting their names out to their loved ones. We will find a way.
Where are the injured going? Where are the injured being taken
A variety of area hospitals.
How big was the penetration of the plane itself, Admiral? How many rings at the building?
I don't know.
How wide would you say that gash is? 100 feet, the one we're looking at?
I haven't been over there to see it up close. I don't know. I think that's all for now, ladies and gentlemen. We'll try to be back out and give you some more information as we can.
Marine Corps only, if you wanted to do that.
That's Rear Admiral.
Admiral, how many people work?
We've been talking. You've been listening to Rear Admiral Quigley, one of the folks who works with reporters in the Public Information Office there at the Pentagon. We basically were just listening to the first few minutes of that briefing, getting the word out to people who have friends, family members who work at the Pentagon, telling them if you have people who may be among the injured, we're going to try to find a way to get you that information, to get the word out about which hospital they might be in. Of course, we are dealing with tragedies in untold numbers of families across the eastern, primarily the east coast of the United States, but no doubt these people who work at the Pentagon are from everywhere. People who were on these airplanes are from commercial jets from everywhere in the United States. Aaron, back to you.
It is the enormity that's a little bit hard to get our arms around right now. Still, some considerable number of hours since the first attack on the World Trade Center here in New York. And I want to show some pictures of the scene from the ground, but first let me just, a piece of information. United Airlines has now canceled all flights, grounded all flights until 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. This is the scene that started to play out. This would be a little after 9 when the first of the trade centers collapsed after they were hit. People gathering, watching. You can see this, the denseness of the smoke. People leaving in a very orderly, calm way. have been the reports all morning and afternoon long. One witness who was in the building talked about coming down the stairwell and that people were very quiet. There was no screaming, no crying. People shielding themselves against the smoke. We know that a number of New York City police and fire department personnel have been injured, perhaps some fatally, when the buildings collapsed. We know that hospitals here in New York are in desperate need of blood. We know that the National Guard will be coming into the city to help in support of the 40,000 members of the New York City Police Department. We know that subway service in Manhattan has been shut down. People evacuating streams of people through the streets. There are 50,000 people who go to work just in the Trade Center buildings, the two towers. How many of them were there at the time, we do not know. Thousands, tens of thousands more pass through, getting on and off trains, going to the retail shops and restaurants. Every one of those lives changed today, as perhaps in some way all of our lives have been changed today. It all began at 8:45 this morning, and behind us now, the smoke continues to pour out of the area where the Trade Center towers were. They are no more. They collapsed in the hour after the attack, but the smoke continues to pour through that area behind us, about 30 blocks away, in one of those scenes that none of us will ever forget. CNN correspondent Richard Roth has been on the streets here in Lower Manhattan. Richard?
Yes, Aaron, not chaos here. It's almost eerily silent of the march of thousands of New Yorkers evacuating southern Manhattan, looking to go to New Jersey to get off this island. Dazed, stunned, people concerned about loved ones, cell phones not working. New Yorkers are used to coping with a lot of things here. There have been some bombings and hurricanes and calamities, but really nothing like this before. And of course, behind me are the clouds of where the World Trade Center stood, two towers built in 1970. A short time ago, a Port Authority police official, the Port Authority is the state unit that runs, in effect, the World Trade Center, those buildings that formerly existed, and one of the police officials there, William Hall, said there is no search going on right now. He said until the fires go out, until it is safe for his people and other rescue workers to go in, they are not moving in there. He said on an average day, the two World Trade Center towers get 10,000 people each with 5,000 visitors. A New York City police official told us a short time ago that another triage center is going to be set up here on the west side of Manhattan, 33rd Street area in the Jacob Javits Convention Center. This to handle additional overflow from New York City hospitals, which New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani says have been doing their best in coping with it, but there have been calls for blood. People here walking by me, someone will point to someone and say, this person was in the World Trade Center, just got out. You can hear behind me, there is the roar of military aircraft, the only aircraft you see in the sky. And usually, as New Yorkers will tell you, you can look up at any time and see a plane. They are up in the sky, concerned look from people who gaze upward, shield their eyes to see just what's going on, and an occasional police helicopter. But here in New York City, there is no search going on. William Hall of the Port Authority said we're going to have to wait until we get things all accounted for before we can go in there. Aaron.
Richard, thank you. Richard Roth in Lower Manhattan. Again, just a quick recap for those of you who may just be getting home and hearing these events for the first time. 8:48 this morning, one of those moments that everyone will remember. The first plane, American Airlines Flight 11, Boston to Los Angeles, hijacked, crashed into the First Trade Center tower. At 9:04, the second plane, the United Airlines Flight United 175, Boston to Los Angeles, hit the second tower. About a half hour later, 9:38 Eastern Time, American Airlines Flight 77, Washington Dulles Airport to Los Angeles, crashed into the Pentagon, hitting just short of the Pentagon itself, and perhaps that was most fortunate. And at 10:20 a.m. Eastern Time, United Flight 93, Newark to San Francisco, crashed about 80 miles outside of Pittsburgh. Those are the times and the events. They don't begin to describe what has happened. What has happened is not simply a series of moments, but something much larger. Phil Zappetta is with the American Red Cross, and he is on the phone with us. Mr. Zappetta, this is Aaron Brown. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can, Aaron.
Tell me what sort of strain is on the Red Cross's resources right now.
Well, the American Red Cross responded immediately to all areas of this disaster. Right now, our focus is really on disaster relief, providing blood assistance, and any disaster mental health assistance that we can provide around the country to both the survivors and the families who've been involved in this tragedy.
Phil, tell me what that means exactly. I understand the need for blood. Are you setting up shelters for people?
Sure. We have shelters both in New York City and in Washington, D.C. that are set up to help people. There we have disaster mental health counselors that are able to meet with people and to register people as they come in and are trying to get away from the situation. We are set up in New York at Penn Station, at Grand Central Station, and in Washington, D.C. at Fort Belvedere. It is still chaos right now. We are in the process of ramping up our operations. While we did respond immediately, there's so much work to be done, and we're in the process of doing that right now. We have about 50,000 units of blood that are available for the affected areas, and the American Red Cross is looking at mobilizing that right now and putting that into place.
And Phil, as you were speaking, we were able to put up on the screen numbers that people can call if they can help. If you're sitting in Omaha, Nebraska today, is it helpful in this situation to be going to the blood bank and giving blood, or is it too far away to be meaningful?
The message that the American Red Cross is putting out right now is to donate blood. Call 1-800-GIVE-LIFE, GIVELIFE, or visit redcross.org for more information. But giving blood is where our emphasis is right now.
No matter where you are in the country?
Yes, well, no matter where you are in the country, or you can, contact your local hospital if you're not in a Red Cross area, but 1-800-GIVE-LIFE is the best number to call. Okay, so even if you are far away from the events of today, you can still be helpful, as there is certainly in New York and in Washington, from what Judy said, a serious shortage of blood. The American Red Cross can be helpful. Your local hospital, your local blood bank can be helpful. We suspect before the day is out, fire stations around the country will be involved in these efforts as well. Phil, thank you. Is there anything else, by the way, before I let you go, that you want to say that would be helpful to our viewers or helpful to the Red Cross? Well, the Red Cross right now and our president, Dr. Bernadine Healy, extend our heartfelt sorrows to all families and everyone that's been affected by this. We just urge people to donate blood. Thank you very much, Phil, with the American Red Cross. Phil Zappetta with the American Red Cross. CNN's Miles O'Brien has been tracking the flight paths of these 4 planes that were involved. Miles, are you able to hear me in Atlanta?
Yes, I am, Aaron.
And tell me what you've been able to figure out to this point.
Well, as you probably know, Aaron, there are various commercial websites that allow you to track commercial aircraft. Now, if you go to many of them right now, you're not going to get very far because they're being overwhelmed by interest in people. But even if you could get some of the data, we have just learned from the Federal Aviation Administration that every domestic airliner that was in the air is now on the ground. This is unprecedented in aviation history in this country. There's not a plane flying right now. At any given moment, typically there are 4,000 aircraft. Now, let's take a look at what happened on American Airlines Flight 11. Began in Boston, and it took off on time, 81 people aboard, 9 crew members, 9 flight attendants and 2 pilots. And let's sort of track what happened with this flight. As it went across Massachusetts and went down into the Albany area, actually up in the Adirondacks, it took a sharp dogleg. What's interesting about this flight is everything seemed to be normal. Flight at altitude was about 29,000 feet, gaining speed at about 450 knots. It took that sharp dogleg down across the Adirondacks straight for New York. Now, what will be interesting about this as this story unfolds will be, number one, listening to any air traffic control conversations to get a sense of what, if anything, air traffic controllers were saying to this aircraft. Undoubtedly, this was spotted on the radar screens, of course. They had quite a bit of time to watch this plane as it went down toward New York. That's probably at least a 30-minute run there. And during the course of that time, those air traffic controllers in those radar installations, New York Center, as it is called, would have been trying to contact American Airlines Flight 11 to indicate its intentions. It must have been a horrifying scene for them. They were probably trying to clear air traffic out of the area. Clearly, once those tapes become available, we'll have a little bit more knowledge. And if it is possible to locate any of the so-called black boxes, the flight data recorders, cockpit voice recorder out of this particular aircraft, they'll obviously know more about what was going on what must have been a very dramatic flight indeed. Now, this is the first flight. This is the flight that first impacted the first tower of the World Trade Center, and this is the first of 4 that we know about, of course, 4 air hijackings, which led to crashes and obviously a tremendous amount of damage. I'm getting this information from a company called FlightExplorer.com. They are compiling their archival radar information from this morning, and as it becomes available, we'll be able to show you the flight paths of the other 3 aircraft that are suspected in all of this, and we'll bring those to you as soon as we get that. Aaron?
Just a quick practical question. These tapes of the cockpit tower communications, do they exist on the ground?
Yes.
Are they recorded in control towers, and then there's a different set of tapes that exist on the plane?
Exactly. It's important to bring out, there are 2 types of tapes in these incidents. The tapes on the ground are the ones that record the radio transmissions between the ground and the aircraft, and clearly the flight controllers would have been calling this aircraft numerous times, and this would have been the case for the 3 others if they deviated from their courses, trying to get some indication as to what was wrong, why the pilot was changing course so dramatically. Now, what will be interesting to hear is if there is some sort of response from these aircraft. This will give us some clue as to who might have been in control of the plane at the time, or if there might have been some sort of struggle aboard, or if there was just a lack of a struggle. There's a lot of mystery here, obviously. Now, ultimately, as they go through the wreckage in these cases, it's possible that investigators, and there's a good chance because they have emergency locating devices on them, they'll find these so-called black boxes, and on those black boxes there might be much more information which might give authorities some clues as to who might be responsible.
Several different kinds of information. There's technical information in these black boxes, what the airplane was doing in a sense, but there's also communications between the cabin crew that exist on those tapes, what pilot was saying to co-pilot. We might be able to hear, if these tapes are ever located, what the people who took control of these planes, and that's clearly what happened, seems clear that that's what happened, what they were saying. Whether these tapes will ever be found, obviously we don't yet know, but that is part of what will happen in the next days. On this day, what is happening in both Washington and New York and in a field outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, is a massive, massive rescue operation, a massive triage operation. Thousands of people, presumably, have been hurt. Many people, we suspect, have died, though many hours now since that first plane hit the Trade Center at 8:48 Eastern Time. We have yet to hear from any official in the city any estimate here in New York of the number of people who have been hurt. We just know that hospitals are inundated, that hospitals are running very low on blood, and they need help here. We know that the National Guard will be coming in here to New York to help in support of the New York Police Department. We would add here that a number of members, and we don't know how many, but after the police and fire responded to these 2 planes hitting the Trade Center, Many police officers, many firefighters, many EMS personnel were in the area when the buildings collapsed. How many of them were hurt, we do not know, but we've been told now by two officials or former officials with the city that any number of people, police and fire officials, have been hurt as well. Judy in Washington, Judy Woodruff. Judy.
And Aaron, just picking up on your conversation with Miles O'Brien a moment ago, and perhaps you all referred to this, and I apologize if I'm repeating the Associated Press reporting on a passenger that was on United Flight 93. Now, this is the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania. About 20 minutes before that plane crashed, a passenger with a cell phone locked in a bathroom actually called an emergency dispatcher and shouted into the cell phone, "We are being hijacked, we're being hijacked." They apparently stayed on the phone with this passenger up until the moment when the passenger heard some sort of a loud noise, and then they lost contact. That's just one more piece of the stories, the many, many, many stories that we are pulling together as we watch these developments in Pennsylvania, here in Washington, and of course in New York City. And you just heard Aaron talking about incomplete information about casualties, what hospitals are dealing with. Now, these numbers I'm going to read you right now are only incomplete. We are just beginning to get this kind of information. We're told at Washington area hospitals right now, 53 injured, at least 3 more casualties on the way, although we have to believe that with the commercial jetliner that crashed at the Pentagon, or just in front of the Pentagon, and that was the Boeing 757, and these are the pictures of the Pentagon just outside the Pentagon. 58 passengers on board, 4 crew members and 2 pilots. It is impossible to believe that they did not all perish, and we don't know about others who work at the Pentagon who were in the part of that building that was most affected when that commercial plane went down. We've been talking with a number of people involved in